Welcome to this Transcelerate webinar on real-world data analysis to support safety signal assessments. Next. My name is Clint Cron and I work with Transcelerate's Patient Safety Initiatives. I will be your moderator today. Next. We will begin with a few logistics and ground rules, followed by a brief overview of Transcelerate. Our presenters will then offer background into Transcelerate's rapid signal assessment using real-world data initiative, their RSA RWD framework, and the alternative to a full protocol template and user guide. Our presenters will then make concluding remarks and take questions from the audience. Next. Now a few logistics. All participants will be muted for this call. You may connect to audio either via your computer or mobile device. As seen to the right on this slide, you can reduce the control panel for a better presentation view. You may submit questions for our presenters by typing your question and clicking the send button as seen here. Please indicate if your question is for a specific presenter. Finally, please be aware that this webinar may be recorded in whole or in part. Next. Please take a moment to download the handout for this webinar by navigating to the Handouts feature on your control panel as shown here. The handout contains links to the content we will discuss today and other related resources. Next. We want to make this discussion helpful and answer as many of your questions as we can, so here are some additional ground rules. Participation is voluntary, as is using Transcelerate assets and tools. The responsibility for compliance with laws and regulations is owned by the solution adopter. You don't have to identify what company you work for either. Here are some things we would ask for you to please not discuss. What vendors, investigative sites, CROs, etc. you are using or not using. Any issues you may have with any vendors, sites, or CROs. Your long-term development plans. Anything related to costs or pricing. And we can't answer questions about vendors, costs of using or implementing Transcelerate assets or tools, or which Transcelerate member companies are using the assets or tools. Next. And now for a brief overview of Transcelerate. Next. Transcelerate is a not-for-profit entity created to foster collaboration. And since inception, we have prioritized robust collaboration with key stakeholders across the R&D ecosystem. That includes global health authorities, data providers, industry consortia, and others. Please visit our website for solutions which are in many cases available in additional languages. Next. And now we will hand it over to Vaishali Patadia, who is the workstream leader for Transcelerate's rapid signal assessment using real-world data initiative. Vaishali?
Thank you, Clint. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this informative webinar. My name is Vaishali Patadia. I head up Signal Management and Risk Management Center of Excellence at Amgen. For the last 2 years, I've also had a great privilege of leading the Rapid Signal Assessment using Real-World Data project at Transcelerate. I'm incredibly grateful for the opportunity to lead this team and work alongside talented and dedicated individuals across the industry. I have 3 of my colleagues from our core team joining today. Can we go to the next slide? And then one after, please. So 3 of my colleagues from the core team are joining me today for this presentation: Wang, Katie Miller, and Claudia Salinas. So this is what we are going to do for the next 40 minutes. I'm going to start with sharing with you background information on the initiative. Then Lou and Katie are going to provide you details on the framework that we have developed. Claudia will then share information with you on the alternatives to full protocol approach that we have developed for rapid use of RWD in signal assessment. Next slide. Okay, so on this slide, let's start with the chevron process that you see on the top of the slide. This, as you may recognize, has high-level steps carried out in a signal management process. So signal detection, validation, prioritization, assessment, recommendation for action, and communication. An important central step of a signal management process is signal assessment, which involves evaluating a validated signal by considering all available evidence from different sources to either confirm or refute a validated signal. The focus of our initiative was on signal assessment step only, the one that is highlighted in pink in the process. So please keep that in mind for the rest of our presentation today. All the other steps were outside of the scope for our initiative. Now, signal assessment step typically relies on analysis of internal and external pharmacovigilance databases and clinical trial data and scientific literature. RWD collected during routine clinical care can provide meaningful context to signal assessment. RWD related to patient health status and healthcare delivery are derived from a variety of sources, including electronic health records and administrative claims data. Using RWD and generating real-world evidence in pharmacovigilance usually requires the lengthy and costly process of carrying out a formal pharmacoepidemiologic study with a standard protocol. These studies do provide strong evidence for safety profile of a specific medication, but they are often not possible within the strict regulatory deadlines for signal assessment. So across the biopharmaceutical industry, while using RWD in signal assessment has extra value, RWD are not commonly used in signal assessments that have time pressure. To include real-world evidence in a signal assessment, the utilization and analysis of RWD need to be speed up to meet the regulatory deadlines. Therefore, Translate formed Rapid Signal Assessment using Real-World Data initiative. The goal of this initiative was to understand current practices and identify opportunities for rapid use of real-world data analysis in signal assessment. The solutions that we have developed are intended to help to overcome some of the limitations of traditional approaches and potentially enhance patient safety and public health. Next slide, please. So a bit of historical overview. The idea for this initiative was put together in 2021 within Translate. The project team officially kicked off in 2022. In the first year, we are calling it phase 1. We focused on understanding the current landscape and identifying opportunities. I will share additional information on that with you in a few minutes. Then at the end of 2022, we narrowed our focus on 3 opportunities out of 20 or so that we had identified. In 2023, in phase 2, the team focused on developing solutions for the 3 opportunities that we had identified. And this year, we're happy to disseminate information on these solutions with you and then all other stakeholders. Next slide, please. Okay, so in 2022, in phase 1, as I had mentioned, we put our efforts on understanding the current landscape to identify the opportunities. So how did we do that? We had a multi-pronged approach. We went to the source. We said, let's ask the people who are doing these activities every day. And we did this by doing a member company survey. In this survey, we asked about how companies are currently using RWD in signal assessment. We asked questions like, how long does it typically take you to do RWD analysis? We also asked about barriers and challenges that companies are facing with use of RWD in signal assessment. At the time we conducted the survey, there were 20 member companies in Translate network. We were very fortunate to have 90% response rate on the survey. So that was one source of information. Next slide, please. As part of the multi-pronged approach, we also did an extensive scientific literature review. We went back 5 years and looked for any articles describing the utilization of real-world data in signal assessment. As you can see on the slide, within about 8 weeks, we narrowed down about 1,700 abstracts to 58 articles that were relevant to our topic. I have to say this was accomplished in such a short time due to diligence of the core team and tremendous support that we got from our reference team. Of these, we found only 5 articles that had some mention of rapidly using RWD in signal assessment. In addition, what is not shown on this slide, we also did an extensive review of scientific initiatives and regulatory guidances on this topic, such as FDA Sentinel, Darwin EU, Odyssey, EDENS, and many more. Next slide, please. So based on the learnings from phase 1, we had identified about 20 or so opportunities. And obviously, we cannot work on all 20 at the same time. So we then narrowed it down to 3 to focus on it in 2023 in our phase 2. From our current state assessment, we learned that opportunities exist for efficiencies across the process for evidence generation using RWD. Clearly defined framework for rapid use of RWD for signal assessment was highlighted as an important enabler to support signal assessment. Having a common understanding of communication and communicating of concepts and processes may increase use of RWD in signal assessment. So that led to our first opportunity that you see here on the slide to create a framework. Lou and Katie will share with you more information on this today. Now let's move to the opportunity listed in the middle of the slide. Literature findings that we had centered on lengthy, formal, protocolized RWD studies. The uncertainties around acceptance of a minimal protocol approach by health authorities were raised as one of the top challenges in the survey. The time it took to develop a full protocol was highlighted as the barrier. Therefore, in this initiative, we wanted to develop solutions for stakeholders to carry out RWD analysis as alternatives to a full protocol while still maintaining essential elements that deliver accurate, value-adding analysis and facilitate transparency and alignment with stakeholders. Claudia will share more on this topic with you today. The third opportunity that you see on the slide came from our survey and literature findings. We know that collaboration and data networks carried out by regulatory and health authorities like FDA Sentinel, Darwin EU, and scientific initiatives such as Odyssey, EDENS, and others are helpful for applying RWD in signal assessment. However, from our survey, we understood that these are underutilized by member companies. There are barriers to access, especially if you are a small or mid-sized organization. Therefore, we decided to do further feasibility on this topic in 2023. Mainly, we wanted to make sure we were not duplicating efforts if we decided to move forward with the opportunity. We have prepared our recommendations for next steps, and they are with Transferate for their consideration. Since this opportunity was feasibility assessment only and not full solution development, we will not cover this opportunity in the webinar today. We will mainly focus on sharing with you about the framework and alternatives to full protocol. Next slide, please. I would like to acknowledge the colleagues who have contributed to this project for over 2 years. Their support and dedication were essential for us to reach to this point. Lou, Katie, Claudia, and I are speaking on behalf of everyone who has been part of our core team and the reference team. Moreover, the project benefited from the assistance and support provided by Transferate. I truly appreciate the collaboration and support over the past 2 years. My thank you to everyone. So now let me pass this presentation to Lou.
Thank you, Vaishali. Hello, everyone. I'm Lu Wang. I'm a director in global epidemiology at Johnson & Johnson. It's my pleasure to be here today presenting our work on behalf of the Transferate initiative on rapid signal assessment using real-world data. Next, I will talk about how we developed the framework. Next, please. The development of the framework took collective efforts of the initiative team over several months. At our starting point, we reviewed existing material in the public domain, and then we worked in sprints. Each sprint took about 2 to 3 weeks. In sprint 1, we generated an overall process map with main sections and steps. The whole team was split into 3 section work groups. Each group focused on one section and identified the key inputs, outputs, and key stakeholders of each step within a section. In sprint 2, each section work group continued to focus on one section and identify the challenges as well as opportunities for rapid real-world data analysis in each process step. In sprint 3, all section work groups came back together, created additional materials that are helpful for people to use the framework, including a glossary, use cases, and key considerations for rapid analysis execution. In the final sprint, the complete framework document was reviewed and finalized by the whole team to ensure consistency and cohesion throughout. Next, please. In developing the framework, we have 4 pillars as our foundation. First, accuracy in evidence generation should be maintained when measures are taken to perform rapid real-world data analysis. Second, the information generated from real-world data analysis should add value to signal assessment that is not available from other sources. Third, the process of real-world data analysis and real-world evidence generation should be transparent for stakeholders. Documentation should be maintained to facilitate communication. Last but not the least, organization alignment should be pursued throughout the process. That said, the extent of internal and external alignment could vary by the specific questions and stakeholders involved. Altogether, these 4 pillars provide the scientific rigor required for high-quality real-world data analysis for signal assessment, regardless of whether the analysis is executed rapidly. When the analysis is performed in a rapid fashion, it is particularly important to make sure these 4 pillars are not compromised for rapidity. Next, please. Now we will go over the process map presented in our framework. Here, I want to note that even though we developed this process map for real-world data analysis to support signal assessment, this map is potentially applicable to real-world data analysis conducted for other purposes. We divided the whole process into 3 main sections. Section A is problem formulation, planning and design. Section B is analytical execution. And Section C is results interpretation and communication. Within each section, there are multiple process steps that need to happen, and we will review more details next. These steps should be sequential, but there are also possibilities that the team of safety signal management needs to go back and forth between some steps to ensure the 4 pillars we just emphasized underlying all real-world data analysis: accuracy, value adding, transparency, and alignment. Next, please. Here we are looking at the detailed process steps in Section A, problem formulation, planning, and design. In this section, we outline 5 steps. Within each one of these steps, we describe in detail the specific activities that should happen. We will walk through this on a high level. If you are interested in a specific step, you can see more details in the handout. We also highly encourage you to grab our complete framework document and read more details there later. The process started when a validated signal reached the stage of signal assessment, either triggered internally or required by regulatory agencies. In step A1, the cross-function team responsible for signal assessment needs to formulate the research question and determine whether the conceptual medical question could be investigated using real-world data. If the answer is yes, in step A2, fit-for-purpose real-world data sources need to be identified for the considered analysis. After this, in step A3, the team will make a go, no-go decision on whether real-world data analysis will be conducted to support a signal assessment. Considerations in the decision-making will include the timeline required for the assessment, resources available for analysis, accessibility, and readiness of data sources. If the team's decision is to go, in step A4, either a study protocol or an alternative to protocol, such as an abbreviated analysis plan, should be developed for the team to review and finally to approve in step A5. It is possible, and actually it happened quite often, that there are back and forth between steps A4 and A5 until the protocol or abbreviated analysis plan is finalized. Next, please. Here is the process steps in section B, including analysis preparation and analysis execution. Similar to what we just reviewed in section A, within each step, we describe in detail the specific activities. In step B1 analysis preparation, specification of analysis will be created and reviewed. Definitions of phenotypes will be finalized. Output format and visualization will be determined. In step B2, analysis execution, all the pre-specified definitions will be applied. Analysis is executed, data are generated and documented, including any changes made to the original protocol or abbreviated analysis plan. Next, please. Now is the section C, results interpretation and communication. We outline 4 steps in this section. In step C1, results review and interpretation, analysis results will be interpreted in context of other available information. Also, the limitations of real-world databases and observational study design should be carefully considered and discussed. In step C2, results should be documented and archived appropriately for transparency, both in the form of a standalone real-world data report and as part of the evidence integrated into the complete document of safety assessment. Steps C3 and C4 are internal and external disclosure. The internal disclosure will ensure alignment across different function teams within the organization, and external disclosure will ensure the completion of analysis meets regulatory requirement. Next, please. In our framework document, in addition to the process map we just reviewed, we also provide a tabular view of each process step. Here, we can see as an example, the process details for step A1, formulation of research question, and step A2, data source identification. In the table, the goal of each step is presented in the left column. The detailed process activities and the key considerations are in the middle. And the challenges to a rapid real-world data analysis and opportunities for acceleration is presented to the right. We have already walked through the detailed process activities in earlier slides, Here, I'd like to call your attention to the column of rapidity challenges and opportunities. For example, in step A1, formulation of a research question, the team could run into several challenges. They could be either the medical question is not very clearly defined, or the communication of a validated signal is delayed, or it's difficult to gather all available information about the signal. Opportunities for rapidity include early communication with cross-function team on the signal, safety signal question, compiling a catalog of accessible real-world data sources in advance, and developing a system to manage all available information and prior knowledge about the signal. In our framework document, such information and recommendations are presented for each step in the process map. Now I will pass the presentation to Katie to discuss other important and valuable contents in the framework document in addition to the process map.
Thank you, Lou. Hello, everyone. My name is Katie Miller, and I'm a Principal Scientific Enablement Director within the Product Development Safety Organization of Genentech, a member of the Roche Group. It's my sincere pleasure to be here today to speak amongst my excellent and highly collaborative colleagues. So thank you for your attention. I'll briefly summarize the key aspects or considerations of the RSA RWD framework that Lou described so well for us. Each of the 4 elements displayed here have been called out because of their potential to enhance rapidity of a real-world data analysis for drug safety signal assessment. And actually, they may be used interchangeably depending on your needs or your situation. Specifically, alternatives to full protocol that Claudia will describe in further detail in a few minutes might be an option your team employs, as it provides users with a clear template and guide to save time, keep structure, and maintain scientific rigor for a drug safety signal assessment that uses real-world data. The consideration of data source identification might be another option for your team, as it speaks to the efficiencies gained when relevant real-world data sources are compiled, cataloged, and well understood within your organization ahead of time in anticipation of potential drug safety signal workups. Similarly, when teams use real-world data, advanced phenotyping, and/or analytic preparedness techniques, they are essentially being proactive, for example, about operational definitions of real-world data analytic code, output formatting, and/or possible software choices prior to actually working under the tight timeline constraint of an actual drug safety signal assessment. Next slide, please. Another thing that we'd like to highlight that actually came about by surprise for us during the work that we were putting together is review of the ICH M14. And for those of you who do not know, the International Council for Harmonization of Technological Requirements for Pharmaceuticals in Human Use, or ICH, have numerous multidisciplinary guidelines. One of which, the M14, which is about actually general principles on planning and designing pharmacoepidemiologic studies that utilize real-world data for safety assessment of a medicine, is very aligned with our work and actually came out for draft review while our work stream was well underway last year. Alignment with the ICH M14 that isn't actually yet final was outside the scope of the RSA Real-World Data Initiative. Yet we felt, because of the topic and the stakeholders involved in its development, it was important to review to assess coherence with the RSA Real-World Data Framework. And we're really glad for this review because it gave us some important findings 3 of which are highlighted here, but there are actually more good nuggets within the M14. One of the findings we thought was important was, as Lou already illustrated, the importance of having clear alignment and accuracy between the actual conceptual medical definition that comprises the actual adverse event that's being described for a drug safety signal assessment versus the actual operational definition within the real-world data analysis. When there's misalignment between these two concepts, it could result in differences between what is actually being assessed for the signal and what the results are of the real-world evidence. So we thought that finding was really important. Another aspect that the M14 helped us articulate was the importance of traceability and knowledge of a real-world data source. So for internal alignment within an organization, we like to emphasize that it's really important that in order to use real-world data rapidly in a signal assessment, it is really important that within your organization, knowledge of that data source, including where that data is derived from originally, is important. And lastly, I'd like to highlight that the M14 helped us really clarify the importance around having internal quality processes in place, such as identifying what the strengths and limitations are of a potential real-world data source prior to using it in a rapid signal assessment. And this would help with transparency, like the pillars of the framework Lou highlighted, as well as alignment amongst team members and stakeholders within your organization again. Okay, so next slide, please. Okay, and so finally, I'd like, my last bit is to talk about this added feature of the framework that we've put together. We provided several use cases to support these solutions to help guide teams through realistic, even though they're fictitious, situations and scenarios when the framework could be considered. Each of the use cases provides a realistic situation of a drug safety signal assessment, typical team challenges, some of which Lou already mentioned, like, challenges with communication or challenges with defining the actual criteria within the real-world data analysis based on what the safety signal is all about. And then we've also provided practical methods for each team to increase rapidity of a real-world data analysis, with the ultimate value also being described that would benefit to your team, your organization, as well as patients and society. Okay, so now I'll hand it over to Claudia, who will walk us through the alternatives to full protocol.
So I'm Claudia Salinas, and I'm a Senior Director at Eli Lilly and Company in the Global Patient Safety Epidemiology Group. So thank you, Katie. And now I'd like to introduce the Alternative to Full Protocol template, or ATFP as we call it. Just as a reminder, this is one of the 4 key considerations to emerge from the framework. If I could have the next slide, please. Thanks. So what is the framework? Well, earlier you heard that Trancelerate members mentioned that creation of a lengthy full protocol was one of the barriers to adopting rapid analysis of real-world data to complement traditional signal assessment. So the ATFP template and its accompanying user guide is a solution that addresses that directly. So what the ATFP is a simplified minimal template that describes key study design and analysis elements that are required for scientific rigor, and it does so in a transparent way that permits replication. And if I could have the next slide. Oh, and just as a reminder, the scope of the template is for signal assessment, not for a full protocol or to replace the full protocol template. So what is in the template? So we've designed it so that it can support either descriptive or comparative study designs. And to facilitate rapidity, you'll see that there are on the far, in the figure on the far left, you'll see that there are checkboxes besides standard designs that are listed there. So these should be commonly used designs, commonly used in your company. It may be that some of the listings that are in here are not common, so you can remove them, or perhaps in your company there is something that's maybe a little less common in all of the real world evidence groups, but it's done every day in your company and you would want to include it. So the company includes the critical features that are incorporated into existing full protocols in a simplified way. And you can see that listing on the far right. You don't have to read through that. The elements that are included are consistent with the guidances and best practices in various publications and certain sections to speed the rapidity. So what you see as an example in the data sources is that there's a description of all of the data sources that were considered for the study for transparency and details about that data source. So if I can have the next slide, please. Okay, and so when do you use the template? So the user guide has information about this, amongst other things that help people fill in the template. But let's walk through this. So in general, anything that increases the complexity of an analysis or of a study moves you away from considering the alternative to full protocol template. So these are things like if you have a complex analysis, and complex could mean real analytic complexity, or it may be something that is not common or standard in your company. If you need to meet company requirements for whatever reason for the full protocol, obviously you wouldn't want to use the ATFP template. If you have a low level of standardization, so in the framework we've outlined that standardization increases rapidity and makes it easier to use real world data for signal assessment. If you don't know the kinds of analyses that will be needed, if you will need to program a lot of new things, if you have unique data sources that you don't commonly use, this may not be the best time to consider the ATFP template. If the results will be complex to interpret, if the study is a regulatory requirement and it has to be registered externally, if you need to have complex data management, and this could be because you are linking data sources or because you need to newly transform data, say to a new common data model. In addition, if you have multiple or complex sensitivity analyses, maybe one sensitivity analysis or something that is done routinely would be fine, but certainly having many will move you away from using the ATFP template. In addition, if you are planning to collect primary data, meaning data that you collect directly from the participants, and you won't be using data that is pre-existing, independent of your analysis, you would also not want to use the ATFP template. However, if you don't have these things in your analysis, it suggests that you could consider an efficient minimal template to let you rapidly assess a signal using real-world data. And if I can have the next slide, please. Okay, and you can go to the next one, and that's all I'm going to tell you about the template, but I urge you to go and have a look at the links in the handout. And so what we wanted to end by telling you who we thought would be the key audience for the framework and the template and the user guide, and that's really the signal management team who is working directly to evaluate the signal, identify it, and then the broader safety management team that will put all of that into context. So we hope that you will see how the framework, the ATFP template and user guide can facilitate the use of RWD for signal assessment. And thank you very much. Now, Clint, I think we can turn it back to you for a Q&A.
Page. You can also connect with us on LinkedIn. Next. We encourage you to consider registering for our next public webinar, which will be titled Enabling Individual Patient Data Return, an overview of Transcelerate's individual participant data return package. That webinar will be held on March the 28th at 9 o'clock Eastern. Next. And if you're looking for more patient safety content, we invite you to register for our webinar on May the 16th, and that's titled Pharmacovigilance Agreement Solutions You Didn't Realize You Needed. Finally, I'll say thank you for attending today's webinar, and we hope you enjoyed the program. Bye for now.